I've got one that can see.
If you were wondering why everything going on in the world feels so terribly off, then you have come to the right place. A veil has been put over the eyes of humanity. Evil people in high places have been hiding the truth in plain sight and building a false reality on lies and deception for far too long. And now, their time is coming to an end. It's time to fight back, to wake up. This is a time to uprise.
This is a time to uprise. Welcome to today's show. The rumors of war continue with China, and we're going to continue to hear these rumors of war with China and with Russia as they continue to sabotage the United States of America. And of course, this is all being done by design. In America, when everything falls and crumbles, our government is going to blame China, our government is going to blame Russia, when in reality, it is our own government who is doing this to us. But the media will cover conflict with China is inevitable unless the U.S. changes course, Beijing's new foreign minister warns. The fiery comments echoed remarks by President Xi, blaming U.S. efforts to contain China for deteriorating relations and suggesting Beijing would increasingly seek to push back. Now, we know that this is completely false because America has sold out to China. North America is owned by China. Canada and America are owned by China. We have given them our land. We have given them every single thing that they could possibly want. And what they want, inevitably, is to crush and destroy America. And our politicians are allowing it to happen because the only way that this new world communist order will thrive and be able to take place is with the destruction of America. Because they know, the globalists know, that Americans are the hardest and the last line of defense for their new world order, because Americans are nationalists and Americans don't support what our government is doing. But let's take a listen to China and, the rumors of war.
Well, China's new foreign minister has warned there will be war unless the United States changes its path. In a press conference held during the National People's Congress, Qin Gang hit out at the US and said its efforts to encircle China are bound to fail.
The new face of China's foreign affairs fronted the foreign press for the first time. And one of Qin Gang's first statements was to warn of a potential war.
If the United States does not hit the brakes but continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent a crash, and there will surely be conflict and confrontation.
The former ambassador to the United States blamed the US for the souring of relations, denounced America's build-up of forces around China and its series of unsportsmanlike sanctions.
The United States talks a lot about following rules, but imagine two athletes competing in the Olympic race if one side always tries to trip the other. This is not fair competition, but malicious confrontation.
He talked up China's improving ties with Russia, but denied any transfer of weapons and levelled his own accusations around the conflict in Ukraine.
Regrettably, efforts to persuade peace and promote talks have been consistently undermined. It seems that there is an invisible hand pushing for the protraction and escalation of the conflict, using the Ukrainian crisis to serve certain geopolitical agendas.
There have long been fears Taiwan would one day face a similar fate. Beijing claims the self-ruled territory as its own, has threatened to take it over by force, and carries out regular military activity around it. The Chinese foreign minister warned the US must not interfere in this matter, which he describes as China's first red line.
Minister Qin Gang made it very clear that China in the next few years is not going to just listen to what is demanded in the West. China is going to make its own voice. I think the West cannot expect China to just do the ways they want China to do in many aspects, especially those areas that China sees as its core interests.
Australian officials will surely note Qin Gang's criticism of what he described as exclusive cliques of countries in the Indo-Pacific, which he claims make conflict in the region more likely. It was quite an introduction for the new man in an incredibly significant position, whose words and warnings now have great weight. Brent O'Halloran, Sky News in Taipei.
So we're supposed to look at this and we're supposed to actually believe like our country and China are going to go to war. And how did this all start? Oh, over a balloon that was flying over America that we didn't shoot down until it got over the ocean. That's supposed to be what has triggered bad relations between America and China. Huh? How about what should actually, if this was real, trigger bad relations between America and China, is America should have stepped in a long time ago and stopped China for what it was doing to its citizens, how it was enslaving its people, genocide on its people. But America never did that. In fact, the mainstream media never even reports on it. The mainstream media barely ever showed any clips of what was happening during the COVID lockdowns in China. You know, how they were killing people's pets because they were saying that they were going to pass COVID from the pets to the people. No big deal, right? Oh, how about the fact that people were locked in their apartment buildings, which caught fire and the people burned to death because, you know, it was more important for them to be contained and locked in. You remember the horror videos that I showed you from people screaming out their windows? It sounded like a videotape directly from hell of people who wanted to escape being trapped in quarantine and then being forced to stay in there by the military. You know, those types of things you would have thought would trigger war between us and China. But we are owned by China. And you might remember I showed this clip a while ago, of course, on another deleted channel, where I talked about this because America is in debt to China, literally. And don't think that the narrative with America defaulting on their debt, they are subtly messaging this all over the place about how in June, if the Republicans don't pass for more, debt relief, that we're going to go into, default on our loans from China and everywhere else. Thus, they could pull the carpet out from under us. How convenient with everything that's happening that this narrative plays into it. But China, literally, not even just figuratively, as far as the Biden administration being sellouts, the liberals being sellouts to China. No, literally, our country's in debt to China.
China has a huge vested interest in the American economy because it holds almost 25% of all foreign-owned U.S. debt. We owe the Chinese massive amounts of money. So what would happen if they immediately demanded payment? And why haven't they? Robert Krulwich always has a unique way of explaining things and does so in tonight's Closer Look.
These are kids in Shanxi, China, reading out loud all together. It's kind of a reading exercise. But what I want you to notice is what this girl is wearing. Notice she's in a coat, zipped up, and so is he, and so is she. Many classrooms, look at the hats here in Chinese public schools, are not heated in winter. Yes, it would cost money to put in central heating, but the Chinese government has money. Oddly enough, a lot of that money is in America. When the Chinese ship products to the United States, we Americans buy their goods.
Hi. How's it going?
And we, of course, pay dollars. So China right now is sitting on a big sack of U.S. money, which they invest in America.
Well, let's say that the Chinese sack of dollars is $1.4 trillion thick.
That's a lot of money. So some Chinese are asking, why not take the profits that China has made in America and sell U.S. stocks and bonds and dollars and turn them into Chinese money so China can fix some of the problems they've got at home? So if China is going to change $1 trillion U.S. into Chinese money, that means China is going to sell $1 trillion and buy a huge amount of Chinese money. And moving that much wealth from one nation to the other will lower the value of the U.S. dollar, raise the value of Chinese money, with the unfortunate effect that then anything made in China becomes more expensive in America.
If they take $1.4 trillion out of the United States and pour it into China, the value of the Chinese currency is going to more than double. If it more than doubles, everything we buy from China will be more than twice the price.
And when the price of dolls and basketballs and everything goes up here and we buy less, what happens to all those people in China who have jobs making things for America? The Chinese government can't risk that. So for the moment, they can't take their money out of America. Not yet. Robert Krulwich, ABC News.
So on top of all these things where we're in debt to China, where the spy balloons, which are, of course, if our country was really at war with China, would we not have shot down the spy balloon before it flew across the entire country? Okay? They own the United States. So our government has to put out this narrative of the boogeyman being China, the boogeyman being Russia. Why? Because if the people realized that it was actually our own government, there are lots more of us, obviously, than them. And thus, this would not continue to happen. The people would overthrow the government, for the government, of course, for treason, for the government selling out, for the government giving us all up to enslavement, which is what's coming. And of course, unfortunately, they've been able to get away with this because of the division they've caused between conservatives and repulsive people. The repulsive people, of course, are people who identify as liberals, who have very demented, warped minds, who don't understand anything that's actually happening. And of course, there's some liberal people who are nice people, I'm sure, but are very slow at not understanding, and they think everything's about being nice and not hurting people's feelings. So they play into their sensitivities. And that's how we got to where we are. So the United States and China are hurtling towards confrontation and conflict unless Washington changes course. Beijing's new foreign minister warned Tuesday. The fiery comments from Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang underlined the deepening tensions between the world's two largest economies in the wake of the surveillance balloon saga and Russia's war in Ukraine. Keep in mind, the economy, not only talking about what I just mentioned with us being in debt to China, which you could look at that from whatever perspective you want. There needs to be excuses to destroy our economy too. They just did it with COVID. Now they'll do it with other things. Oh, the price of importing things from China is so expensive because China's mad at America. China's not going to give America this crop or that crop. They're not going to give us energy. All this stuff, right? Because we're throwing all of our dependence on other countries instead of being independent, which is part of what they're doing to destroy America. All the other countries will say, we don't want to work with America anymore, or we don't want to be friendly with America. We don't want to be allies. We don't want to give these things to America. We're going to make it so that America can't have this stuff. We're going to starve out America. We're not going to give them crops. We're not going to give them oil. All these things that they want to have happen. But they need a boogeyman in every case. Otherwise, the only propaganda they can come out with is stuff like the January 6th Comedy Central special known as The Insurrection. Which, again, obviously I'm not Republican, but I mean, it's one of the worst CIA operations that's ever been created. I said it the day that it happened, I did a video on it, saying, I mean, if people actually believe this, they're out of their minds. Now, 2 years later, they're finally going, oh my goodness, it was infiltrated by the FBI and the CIA. Well, who do you think started it? That's how all these protests and riots start. They're in the middle of it. They're the ones who rile people up. They're the ones who do the damage, and then whoever actually goes there and thinks that they're going to something that's a peaceful protest ends up getting in trouble for it. They lump you in, and they try to lump people like me and you in with the conspiracy stuff with QAnon, and obviously we all know what's going on, and the QAnon is a obvious CIA operation. Nonetheless, they echoed similarly sharp remarks a day earlier by China's leader, Xi, blaming U.S. efforts to contain China for deteriorating relations and suggesting Beijing would increasingly seek to push back. In a wide-ranging rebuke of U.S. policies, Qin, who until recently was the Chinese ambassador to the U.S., questioned President Joe Biden's assertion that the U.S. seeks competition with China but not conflict. In fact, the U.S. side's so-called competition is all around containment and suppression, a zero-sum game, he said, suggesting the conflict may be avoidable unless Washington stops trying to suppress Beijing. The U.S. side supposedly wants to put guardrails on U.S. relations and not to clash. In fact, it wants China not to respond in words or action when slandered or attacked. That is just impossible. So, I mean, this is all part of the show. Right? This is just done by design. The balloon was done by design. The balloon was highly likely our own balloon. Like I mentioned, in 2020, they came out and they said the FBI was going to put surveillance balloons up flying around America, tracking people to supposedly watch out for drug trafficking, when in reality, it was to monitor people like me and you that they deemed terroristic threats because we question this communist dictatorship that has currently placed itself in power, that has not been elected, that has been selected. And again, this is all about bringing about the New World Order. So we're going to hear rumors of war, and we're going to hear them over and over again. This is biblical. However, keep in mind when you're sharing this information with other people that it's our own government that's doing it, working with the other governments. Every government can present itself as a boogeyman to another country and not have to worry about a threat. So in other words, China could portray America and Americans as a threat to China. Right? So that those people don't think that their president over there is a bad person and he's making them live like this because he's a bad person, which is the reality. They blame it on boogeymen. All these governments do. And that's how they're working people into the one world government. So we'll continue to hear stories like this. It's so clear. I mean, if people don't realize America is sold out to China at this point, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we're literally giving them our farmland. We literally have Chinese police stations in America. I mean, do you think that would ever be allowed? If you mentioned that like 100 years ago, and I'm not saying that all governments that there weren't corrupt governments back then. Of course, government's been infiltrated by secret societies since governments existed, especially the Freemasons. But you wouldn't be able to get away with something like this as far as the public finding out. Oh, wait, what? You gave all those acres in Idaho to China? You gave all those acres in Wyoming to China? The people go, no, you didn't. They grab pitchforks. It'd be over pretty quickly. There'd be a revolutionary war. There'd be a civil war against the government, right? In today's world, of course, we could do these types of things and then distract people by trying to figure out and asking them if a man can get pregnant or not. That's what we live in now. It's pure insanity. It's utter chaos, and this is exactly the way they want it. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families.